22:19, April 13, 42:26. The storm begins in the outer ring of Kyrkos 4. The sky had no stars, only violence. Blades of wind howled over the frozen wastes of Kyrkos 4, slicing through the night like screaming banshees. Ash-gray clouds swirled in a vortex of ionized chaos, each gust laced with crystallized needles of ice and stray debris from shattered outposts. A magnetic storm had detonated across the planet's magnetic field, frying comms and flaying anything foolish enough to stand against it. Something moved beneath the storm. A figure small against the magnitude of the white void dragged a carcass through the snow, each step sinking knee-deep into powder laced with blood and oil. Ella Varen's breath steamed from cracked lips, her goggles flickering with corrupted HUD data, her blood pale violet, shimmering faintly, leaking down a gash in her thigh. It wasn't clotting, it never did, not since the mutations. She didn't look back. Behind her, the remnants of Survival Outpost 6A lay gutted, skeletal beams reaching upward like dead fingers. The storm had stripped the skin from the habitat dome within minutes. Nothing human remained, but Ella was never entirely human. She grunted, tightening her grip around the horned ridge of the Skern corpse. It was massive, 6 meters long, armored plates warped by time and acid snow, but it had fallen to her knife. A lucky cut to the jugular, if such a thing existed in that monstrous anatomy. Now its body was more than a trophy, it was insulation. Shelter, possibly salvation. She reached a snow cliff, a natural wall towering 5 meters high. The storm funneled around it, creating a narrow pocket of false calm. She yanked the beast's limp form into the crevice, collapsed beside it, and stared at its thick underbelly. "Sorry, old one," she whispered, pulling out the plasma blade. "But I need your guts more than you do." The Skern's skin parted under the hum of energy. Steam hissed from the incision as heat met frozen organs. Ella worked quickly, mechanically, cutting deeper until the inner cavity widened enough for her to crawl inside. Then she froze. A sound, low, guttural, vibrated through the snow. Not wind, not metal, a breath heavy, rhythmic, alive. Her hand tightened on the blade. She turned. Up on the ridge, half shrouded in ice fog and stormlight, stood something colossal. Taller than the Skern, broader. Its translucent fur shimmered with frost, its limbs ended in talon-like claws dusted with snow. And from its skull, crowned by an arc of black-boned antlers, eyes glowed a deep, bioluminescent blue. An ice beast, fully grown, watching her. Ella didn't move. The creature's breath curled in the air. It growled, not in hunger, not in threat, but with something stranger. Curiosity, recognition, her heart hammered, muscles screamed. The blade in her hand vibrated from her grip, buzzing softly as it absorbed ambient ions. But she didn't raise it. She was still covered in the Skern's blood. Her pheromonal glands, remnants of the Delta gene experiments, were leaking. Her body temperature matched that of the local apex predators. Her pupils had adapted to the dark. To the beast, she wasn't prey. She was something else. Seconds passed. The ice beast snorted once, loud and sharp, and stomped a forelimb against the snow. The ridge trembled. Ella still didn't move. Then it turned. No attack, no roar, just a long, reverberating call into the storm, a primal sound that rippled through the clouds, and the creature disappeared into the white. Ella exhaled slowly, cautiously, and sank into the steaming corpse of the Skern, pulling the flayed skin over her shoulders. The warmth was nauseating. The stench burned, but she would live, and somewhere in the howling dark. A beast had spared her, not out of mercy, but because, for a fleeting, impossible moment, it believed she was one of its own. Ella Varen did not dream anymore, not since the splice. The nights on Kyrkos 4 were long, absolute, and cold in ways Earth-born minds couldn't measure. Heat wasn't just rare, it was betrayal. To emit warmth was to die. So Ella had learned to bury it, along with most of what had once been human. The CR Delta program had promised resilience. What it created was something else entirely. They spliced human DNA with strands from the native predator species, the Fian, infamous for their bone density, pheromonal communication, and unmatched neural resilience to magnetic storms. A dozen subjects died screaming, the 13th didn't. She adapted. Ella didn't remember the moment the splice took. Only that her skin began to breathe differently. That light hurt less. That she could hear things even when there was no sound. And that her blood changed color, violet under the moonlight, glittering faintly in the cold. But the experiment was deemed a failure, not for lack of success, but for succeeding in the wrong way. The moral line had been crossed. The project was shut down. The files sealed. The lab buried beneath the glaciers of Kyrk's northern pole. And Ella was left behind, not terminated, not rescued. Abandoned, she was the 13th strand, the deviation no one wanted to admit had worked. Now she lived in the ruin of a broken habitat pod, welded into the side of a dead mining ridge. Power cells sputtered once every few hours, enough to feed the one thing that hadn't given up on her, a half-broken AI named Orin. Orin was never meant to speak, just process data, but over time it learned her tone, her rhythms. It filled silence like a ghost in the metal. "You're bleeding again," the voice crackled from a panel on the wall. Male, calm, gently synthetic, Ella didn't answer right away. She stood near the entrance of the outpost, peering into the darkness. Snow twisted across the mouth of the valley, hiding something she couldn't name but felt in her spine. The wind carried more than frost, it carried rhythm. Movement. "I'm always bleeding," she replied finally, brushing a violet smear from her forearm. Orin hesitated. "Your levels are unstable. Exposure to environmental pheromones has increased baseline aggression indicators." She smirked, sliding the makeshift rifle over her shoulder. "What do you suggest, Doctor? Meditation. I suggest you avoid contact with anything that triggers the Fian response." Ella laughed, short, sharp, bitter. "This entire planet is asterisk a trigger, Orin. Everything here breathes like them. Everything wants to rip and rut and survive. You used to say you wanted to leave this planet. I still do. You are no longer a legal citizen. You do not have clearance." She didn't respond, because that was the part that hurt most. Ella Varen had been erased, not imprisoned, not exiled. Just deleted, but her instincts hadn't been, sometimes. When the wind carried pheromones from nesting grounds or old battlefields, her mind blurred. Her hands twitched, her body tensed before her thoughts did. She would hear echoes, deep, biological pulses that made her want to run, or fight, or scream into the dark until something answered. That morning before the storm hit, Ella had gone scouting. The ruins of Outpost Theta, torn apart by what command logs called a climate event. She found no survivors, but she found something else. Tracks not clawed, not hooved, not local footprints. Booted, deep and wide with reinforced treads, military-grade exosuit marks burned faintly into the frost. Poachers not from the Union, not official, but geared for extreme climate. She crouched over the indentations, scanning them with the flickering lens on her left eye. The HUD displayed foreign alloy traces, residual vapor from an atmospheric regenerator. And something else, scent marker, chemical, artificial. Meant to attract, they weren't here to survive, they were here to hunt. A tingle ran down her neck. She turned slowly, scanning the jagged terrain. The cliffs surrounding the outpost had collapsed into themselves, forming sharp crevices that looked like teeth. She recognized the pattern. The melt wasn't natural. Someone or something was using sonic displacers. the same tech used in war zones to herd urban populations. But here, it was being used to bait something big. She reached into the snow and touched the edge of the indent. It was still warm. "They're close," she muttered. Back at the ridge, Oren buzzed softly. "Ella, your neural readings just spiked. Did you find something?" "Not something," she replied. "Someone?" There was a pause. "Civilians?" "No, hunters. Armed, and they're not here for data. They're laying pheromonal traps." Oren's voice dropped. "For ice beasts, or worse." She stood, snow falling from her coat in thick clumps. The weight of what was coming settled over her shoulders, like the gravity of a world not meant for forgiveness. She looked out into the white distance, eyes narrowing against the cold. "Set the outpost to silent," she said. "They might detect. They already know something S here. The only thing I can control is what they think it is." Silence stretched. Then softly Oren said, "If they recognize your genetic profile, then let's make sure they don't get close enough to scan it." Ella turned, heading back toward the ridge. Her gait was even, measured, but beneath the snow her pupils thinned into predator slits. Her muscles began to tighten, reflexes coiling like wire under tension. She wasn't prey, not anymore. The 12th strand had survived everything else. It would survive this too. The descent was almost silent. Ella crouched on a ridge of broken shale. Her eyes narrowed against the freezing wind as she watched the ship pierce the veil of clouds. It cut through the magnetic haze like a blade, its hull dark, angular, and marked with symbols not found in any official registry. No transponder, no beacon. It landed 5 clicks west of the old survival outpost, where the ice sheets began to splinter and the terrain grew unstable. Smugglers. No poachers. She knew the pattern, the stealth approach. The shielded core that wouldn't ping orbital satellites. The ship had landed without authorization, and more importantly, with intent. Ella activated the ocular zoom on her cornea implant, watching figures spill from the vessel. They were armored in matte white exosuits, fitted with joint silencers and signal-dampening cloaks. They moved like they'd done this before, efficient, predatory. They fanned out in formation, dragging cylindrical towers into the snow, their boots crunching over layers of ice like hammers wrapped in silk. She smelled it before she saw it, pheromone lures. Synthetic, potent. They were harvesting ice beast musk asterisk, the psychoactive secretion that formed in the scent glands of mature males. On the black market it was called asterisk, cryo rush, asterisk, a hallucinogen, combat stimulant and aphrodisiac rolled into one. Illegal in 7 systems, prized in 15, but harvesting it wasn't just dangerous. It was genocidal. Only 1 in every 100 ice beasts developed a stable musk gland. Poachers would paralyze them using subsonic traps, drain the glands while the creature still lived, and leave the bodies to rot. Ella's jaw clenched. She watched them place the asterisk sonic bait towers, their cores pulsing with a red low-frequency hum. The moment the resonance reached the ground, the snow quivered. The trees, those few black skeletal remnants left on the horizon, vibrated. Birds fled. The silence of the tundra fractured into a low, constant tremor. Ella flinched. The sound wasn't audible to humans, but Ella wasn't only human anymore. The frequency clawed at her skull. It pushed past reason and into instinct. Her skin prickled. Her blood began to throb. Her fingernails dug into the frost beside her. "Ella," Oren's voice crackled faintly through her earpiece. "Your vitals are unstable. Neural spikes in the amygdala." "Do not approach," she didn't answer. "Ella, you are resonating. If you get closer, the splice will respond. I repeat, your hybrid cortex is susceptible to that frequency." Her vision blurred, thoughts fractured into urges. "Run, strike, kill, mate, bite, bury." "I'm fine," she muttered. Her voice was lower than usual, guttural. "You are not. If you pass the 70-meter threshold, you may not come back." Ella took a long breath, pressing her forehead against the icy rock. The pulse of the sonic towers continued. It wasn't just affecting her mind. It was syncing with the dormant traits in her DNA. The Fian response. She had to stop them, but if she got too close, she'd stop being Ella. Then movement. A drone lifted from the lead poacher's shoulder, hovering high, scanning with a bioradar. Ella tracked its arc through the sky. She reached for the pulse rifle on her back. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from something more primal. She clicked off the safety. "I said I'm fine," she growled. Oren's voice shifted, quieter. "I don't want to lose you." She squeezed the trigger. The rifle hissed. The drone exploded mid-air, metal shards scattering across the tundra like silver ash. Silence, then shouting. The poachers looked up in unison. One of them raised a scanner toward the cliffs. A moment later, the device began to shriek. "Delta signature," someone barked. "Holy Void, Delta 13 is alive." The name struck like lightning. Ella froze. They knew her. The figure stepped forward, taller than the rest, visor tinted black, armor scarred and rust-lined. He pulled down his mask, a man with a cybernetic jaw and one synthetic eye. She knew that face. Commander Yarrick Nez, former security head of CR Delta. He wasn't supposed to be alive. "You were just a rumor," he called out, voice carried by a field amp. "They said you went feral, that you drowned in your own blood." "Guess they underestimated you." Ella said nothing. "I won't insult you with a demand to surrender," he continued. "But make no mistake, we're not here for a reunion. We're here for the glands. If you get in the way, we'll put you down like we should have years ago." The wind howled between them. Ella's fingers hovered over her second mag. Her vision flickered, red symbols bleeding through the corners. Her body vibrated with tension, but she wasn't shaking. She was remembering the lab, the tubes, the fire that burned the other 12 splices alive, the smell of charred flesh, his face as he walked away. "You didn't even look back," she murmured. "I should have let the fire finish its job." Her mouth curled into something not quite a smile. "I did." With a leap, she disappeared into the white. The poachers scattered, weapons drawn, scanning frantically through the swirling frost. But Ella was already gone, melted into the haze like a ghost that had learned how to bleed. They hadn't just awakened a memory. They reawakened the part of her she had buried deep. The hunter, the strand that survived, and this time she wasn't alone in the snow. The storm was listening. The wind screamed across the ridge as Ella stumbled, blood trailing violet ribbons in the snow behind her. Her left side was scorched, ribs bruised from a blast that clipped her during the retreat. Plasma burns radiated across her flank in angry, pulsing streaks. Her breath came out ragged and quick, each exhale crystallizing before vanishing into the air like ghosts. She had 30 seconds, maybe less, before the next thermal sweep from the poachers. Scanner drones passed overhead. The Skern's corpse loomed ahead. Half buried in the frost, its massive body lay where she had dragged it hours earlier. Now it would have to be more than a kill. It had to become shelter. Shield, disguise. Ella dropped to her knees beside its bloated belly, muscles screaming, hands shaking as she drew her blade once more. The plasma edge flickered weakly, low power, but sharp enough to finish the job. "I need you dead enough to save me," she muttered under her breath. The blade slid into the thick hide with a wet hiss. Steam burst out in a rank exhalation as the pressure inside equalized with the frozen air. Ella coughed, gagged, pushed forward. Her arms worked on instinct, cutting, separating, dragging thick coils of organ aside until the stench no longer registered. She forced her body through the wound, pulling the flap closed behind her like a crude curtain. Inside it was dark, wet, close. the space barely wide enough to crouch. The warmth was immediate but sickly, radiant heat from biological decay and residual energy trapped beneath armored flesh. She collapsed against the inner ribcage, her breath shuddering. "Orin," she whispered, barely audible. A static pulse buzzed in her left ear. "You're inside the skern. Yes, biometric feedback is erratic." "Pulse erratic. Cortisol spike. Ella, your body is in shock. You need to stabilize. I'm working on it." She peeled back the torso layer of her biosuit. The inner layer clung to her skin, soaked with blood, sweat, and foreign fluids. As she shed the armor, the glow from her body illuminated the rib chamber around her. Her skin shimmered, smooth in some places, scaled in others, the silver blue of bioregenerated tissue catching dim phosphorescence. Patches of her body no longer looked human. Thin plates like scales traced the lines of her spine and ribs. Her shoulders bore ridged plating that hardened in cold. She ran a hand over the ridges, then pulled it back. Her fingers smelled faintly sweet, not hers. The skern's pheromonal gland had ruptured. The scent was thick in the cavity now, an oily, musky trail that clung to her skin, mixing with the residue already latent in her hybrid biology. Her splice-enhanced olfactory sense flared. The aroma was unmistakable. Ice beast musk. Ella stiffened. Her body responded before her mind could catch up. Glands beneath her skin, once dormant, awakened. Her breath shortened. Her muscles tensed. She felt something shift deep in her chest. The gene strand was sinking. She was secreting a asterisk. "No, no, no, no. Orin," she gasped. "The scent, it's triggering." "Something, reading acute hormonal conversion," Orin responded. "You're mirroring the chemical profile. It's a defense reflex." "Camouflage, or mutation." Silence. "I'm not just hiding in a corpse," she whispered. "I'm becoming it." Outside, the wind thickened. The storm reached a crescendo, battering the land in waves of electric fury. The magnetic pulses shorted out most scans. Radar visibility was zero. Thermal imaging scattered. Perfect cover, if she was the only one using it. She closed her eyes, tried to meditate, but the stink of pheromones swam in her head. Her mind began slipping. Images not hers flickered behind her lids. Snow-packed caves, tusked duels in twilight. The guttural cry of offspring not yet born. Were they memories, or projections from her mutating brain? She wasn't sure anymore. And then she heard it. Not a machine, not wind. Something heavy, massive, approaching. A deep, rhythmic thump against snow. Each step sent subtle vibrations through the skern's ribcage. Ella's eyes shot open. Her heart thudded in tandem. She didn't move. A shadow fell across the entrance flap of flesh. Then a long, low exhale. Warm mist seeped through the open gash. A nose, black, chitin-ridged, pressed against the wound, sniffing. The ice beast, fully grown male, alpha. Its breath was slow. Careful, it nosed at the edge of the wound, then stepped closer. Ella didn't move. Her body had gone still, not from fear, but from something deeper. She was resonating with the creature, breathing in rhythm, matching its scent. For 30 full seconds, they remained like that, two apex predators separated only by death and deception. Then the creature shifted. It turned its body sideways, laying down across the mouth of the skern's body. Its bulk forming a shield against the wind. It did not growl. It did not strike, it guarded. Ella's throat tightened. Her eyes burned not from the stench, but from something else. "What am I becoming?" she whispered. "You are surviving," Orin replied softly. "No," she said, voice hollow. "I'm pretending, but how long before pretending is all that's left?" The creature outside snorted, huffed, then went still. Sleep or waiting, she couldn't tell. Ella curled into herself inside the corpse. Her hands shook, not from cold, but from knowing how easily she could step into a role and never step back out. But the choice would soon be made for her. because not all signals were lost. A faint asterisk ping registered on Oren's end. "Thermal sweep," he said sharply. "Ping at 90 meters. They found your heat signature." "How?" "They're using flare-detective plasma scans. New tech, effective even in magnetic storms." Ella's eyes snapped open. She reached for her weapon, slid out of the bile-slick cocoon of the Skern's chest cavity. Outside, the ice beast turned to her, not aggressive, not alarmed, but ready asterisk. On the horizon, 5 white-armored figures approached through the snow, plasma rifles charged and humming. Lights blinked on their visors. Ella rose from the corpse, her skin glowing with refracted light, her breath exhaling in coils that weren't quite human. She no longer smelled like prey, and to the hunters, she no longer looked like a person either. She was something between, and she was done hiding. Night on Kyrksromen 4 was not quiet, it was cruel. The blizzard roared like a living beast, its breath thick with shards of frost and static. Visibility dropped to meters. Sound became directionless, but amidst the chaos, something primal surged through the cold. The ice beast moved first. Ella didn't speak, she didn't need to. Her body, drenched in the pheromonal resonance of the Skern and laced with her own hybrid scent, pulsed with unspoken commands. The creature responded as if she were kin, not its master, not its prey, but something born of the same storm. It charged through the snowdrift, a silent avalanche of muscle and rage. The poachers never saw it coming. The first was lifted clean from the ground. Spine crunched between massive jaws before his scream could register. The second turned, fired a plasma burst too late. His shot seared the beast's shoulder, but the pain only enraged it. His body was smashed into the cliffside, armor collapsing inward with a sound like bones breaking under ice. Ella emerged from the corpse of the Skern, moving like liquid shadow. She sprinted across the snow, ducking behind ridges flanking the third. Her knife found the gap between chest plate and neck. No cry, just breath, then silence. The fourth tried to flee, firing into the dark, his visor flashing red with warnings. Ella triggered her rifle's final shot, an ion burst that knocked him unconscious before the ice beast could reach him. Only one remained, Yarrick Nez, the commander of the Delta Project. The man who once gave the order to burn the other spliced children alive. He stood his ground at the ridge, the blizzard whipping his coat like wings. His face was calm. The plasma rifle in his hands glowed faintly in the dark. "You're not human," he said. His voice was amplified, cutting through the storm. "I see you now. I was wrong to be afraid. You're not the future. You're just a broken animal that learned how to beg." Ella approached slowly, snow crunching beneath her boots. Her skin shimmered with biolite. The wind howled between them. "I'm not yours to name," she said. "You could have been a weapon. A goddamn legend. Instead you crawl in carcasses and speak to monsters." She stopped 5 meters away. "I don't speak to them. I listen, something you never learned." His eyes narrowed. "You're not human, and I'm not your beast." He raised the gun. Fired, the ice beast moved between them like lightning, absorbing the shot into its shoulder, roaring with rage. Ella didn't flinch. She leapt forward as Nez scrambled to reload. Her knife sliced through the rifle's barrel, sparks flared. He swung a fist, she caught it midair, bones cracked. She twisted, slammed him to the ground. The ice beast growled behind her, pacing, eyes glowing like coals. Nez groaned, blood in his teeth. "Do it," he spat. "Prove it." She knelt over him. Her blade hovered inches from his throat. His heartbeat pounded in her ears. His scent reeked of blood and hatred. "It would be easy, quick, efficient." "Oren," she said. Static hummed in her ear. "Ella, you've neutralized the threat. All enemy signals are down. Only one remains." "I know." A pause. "Probability of retribution if you let him live, 89%. She stayed silent. Probability of repeat poaching within the next cycle if he escapes, 94%. Another pause. Probability of survival if you walk away, under 50%. Ella stared into Nez's eyes. He didn't beg. He grinned like someone who knew he deserved death and would carry it like a badge. "You think killing me makes you human?" he rasped. "Then do it, be better than me." She stared for one long moment. Then she stood. She dropped her knife to the snow. It hissed as it cooled. "I'm not better," she said. "But I am different." She walked back, reached into her coat, pulled out a sidearm. She checked the charge empty and tossed it at his feet. "A gun with no bullets," she said quietly. "Let's see what you do with that." The ice beast stepped forward, snarling. Ella raised a hand. The beast paused. "Let him live," she whispered. The creature looked at her, its breath thick in the air. Its muscles twitching, but it obeyed. Slowly it turned away, vanishing into the storm like it had always belonged there. Nez remained on his knees, frozen, stunned. His breath trembled. He hadn't expected mercy. He hadn't deserved it. Ella turned her back and began to walk. Oren's voice returned, soft. "Why?" She didn't answer at first. The snow fell silently now, as if exhausted by violence. Then she said, "Because survival isn't worth it if it costs the last part of me that's still mine." Oren said nothing more. As she disappeared into the fog, the ridge behind her grew still. The ice beast's tracks vanished beneath fresh snow. Nez stared at the empty weapon in his hands. An Ella Varen, Delta 13, hybrid hunter. Anomaly, chose not to become a monster in the name of surviving one. In the end, it wasn't the beast that was tamed. It was the fury. Dawn on Kyrxroman 4 came without color, no warmth, no softness. Just a gradual dimming of the stars, and the rising hush that came when the storm finally surrendered to silence. Ella stood at the edge of the frozen lake. The ice beast's body sprawled behind her like a monument carved by pain and instinct. Its massive form was motionless now, covered in frost, eyes long closed. The snow had already begun to gather on its fur, smoothing its features into something less violent, more solemn. She had dragged the creature here alone, across ridges, through storm-wrecked valleys, and across terrain cracked by magnetic tremors. Not because she had to, not because anyone told her to, but because something inside her said it was right. No one had taught her the rights of this land. There were no books on how to honor a beast born before civilization. No chants or funerary codes for predators. And yet, she found herself arranging its body with care, facing it toward the north, where the wind always began, where legends whispered the first of the Fian were born. She placed her knife on its chest, not to mark conquest, but to acknowledge kinship. "Rest," she said softly. "You were never mine, but you stood beside me." Oren's voice crackled gently in her ear. "I'm reading an energy spike in your region. The storm has cleared. Union orbital satellites are sweeping again." Ella didn't move. "They've detected your position," Oren continued. "Your vitals are stable, your signals strong. If they choose to act, a patrol unit could reach you in 8 hours." Ella closed her eyes. "They won't come for me," she murmured. "They'll just mark the anomaly and move on. You can reach out." "No," she said, "I won't." A pause. "They won't forgive this," Oren said. "Not what you've done, not what you are. I'm not asking for forgiveness. You're a living record of a mistake they buried. If they find you alive, they'll try to finish what they started." She nodded slowly. "I know." A silence passed between them. The kind that didn't feel empty, but full of everything neither of them had ever said aloud. Then she stood. She walked along the lake's edge to a rusted access panel, once part of a mobile science outpost long since swallowed by ice. It still blinked faintly with reserve power. She pried it open, fingers working with patient efficiency. From a compartment in her coat, she removed a small vial of concentrated pheromone, harvested not from the ice beast's corpse, but from her own body, synthesized and stabilized. "This is your plan?" Orin asked. "I'm not running anymore." She injected the pheromone into the control node and linked it to her biosignature. The console blinked. Genetic lock engaged *sector B13. Restricted biozone no entry. Without compatible profile. Ella smiled faintly. "I'm sealing it," she said. "The valley, the ridge, the lake, all of it. Others will come. Not if they can't pass the biological gate. Not unless they share what I have." Orin hesitated. "You're turning your body into a key." "No," she said. "I'm turning it into a warning. Far above, the satellites would register the chemical field. The biozone would show as hostile, contaminated. Union protocols would mark it as non-viable for entry, non-essential for reclamation. A dead zone, just like they wanted her to be." Ella turned back to the ice beast's body. The snow had nearly covered it now. It no longer looked terrifying. Just still, just silent, like a part of the world it had guarded. "I don't belong anywhere else," she said softly. "Not on Earth. Not in their labs, not in their histories. You could have been more." "I am more," she said. "Just not for them." The cold deepened, but she didn't feel it. Her body had long since adjusted. She hadn't worn full thermal gear in days. She didn't need it. Her skin had changed. Her cells had adapted. She was no longer something they could categorize. Not human, not beast, just Ella. Orin's voice was gentler than she had ever heard it. "This is the last entry I'll record." She blinked. "Why? My core's degrading. Solar charge is minimal. Without uplink I'll fade." Ella's throat tightened. "You've been the only voice in my head that didn't belong to instinct." "You've been more human than most I've seen," Orin replied. She knelt by the access panel, leaned close to the speaker grill. "Before you go, can I ask something?" "Of course." "What do you think I am?" "Static." "Then, that question might need a whole new world to answer." She laughed just once. It was rough, real. "You always know what to say. And you always choose the harder path. I guess I had to." "Then maybe that's what you are," Orin said, voice fading. "Not what was made, not what survived, but what chose." She sat by the lake long after his voice disappeared, watching the sky shift from ash gray to pale white. No sunrise, just silence. She didn't bury the ice beast. She let the wind do that, as it had done with everything sacred on this planet. And when the first sweep drone passed overhead, distant, far enough not to scan her beneath the pheromonal field, Ella simply lay back against the snow, closed her eyes, and whispered, "I don't need a homeland." Above her the clouds rolled on. "I have memory." There were no medals, no fanfares, no parades, no final reports sealed in golden archives under titles like Asterisk, Mission Success Asterisk, or Strategic Containment. Operation Delta. There wasn't even a name left. Ella Varon, if she had ever truly existed, was erased from the official systems. The Delta 13 designation had been struck from Union records years ago. The scientists who designed her were either dead, disgraced, or paid enough to forget. The project she survived was categorized as an unethical deviation and sealed behind redacted codes. But on the frozen northern rim of Kyrxroman 4, something had changed. No one could say why, but the ice beasts, once considered hyper-aggressive and untamable, had stopped attacking extraction teams. Their migration patterns shifted. Their territorial warnings no longer escalated to ambushes. Occasionally, orbiting scanners picked up movement on the glaciers that didn't match any known sequence, tracks that circled back instead of closing in, shadows that loomed at a distance but never struck. One report, buried in a footnote of an internal Union survey, described it as asterisk, a behavioral anomaly in apex predators potentially triggered by untraceable pheromonal interference. No one followed up, but the locals whispered. Miners who worked the ice veins in Sector B13 spoke of a woman-shaped figure, tall, draped in furs, silent as wind, always at the edge of the storm, never close. They called her the Pale Kin. They didn't know if she was myth or memory. Just that where she walked, no blood spilled. That was Ella's victory. Not written, not recorded, but real. It was never about conquering anything. It was about choosing what not to destroy. She had every reason to strike back, to kill, to end those who had made her. Used her, abandoned her, and yet she didn't, not because she forgave them, but because revenge would only tether her to the same darkness they had tried to drown her in. She had walked away, she had let them live, not because they deserved it, but because she deserved not to become them. Some would say it was weakness, a failure to finish the mission, to cleanse the threat. But Ella never needed their validation. What she needed, what she found, was something far quieter. It began with breath, a different rhythm, a deeper kind of silence. The kind that came when a creature built to survive chose not to strike. Now the ice stretched endlessly before her, pale blue and silver beneath a blank sky. She sat on the edge of a broken cliff, legs tucked beneath her, the wind pulling gently at her hair. Beside her, nestled in the crook of her lap, was something impossibly rare. A young ice beast, its fur still soft, its antlers not yet hardened, its breath slow and warm against her stomach. No collar, no tag, no implanted tracker or restraint. Just presence, just proximity, just trust. She hadn't raised it. It had simply come to her, alone, shivering, motherless, and laid down without command or fear. It had chosen her, the same way she had chosen not to kill. She ran her fingers gently down its back, feeling the rhythm of its tiny heart, steady and alive. No one else would ever understand what that meant. But she didn't need them to. Oren's voice was gone now, his final words echoing days, weeks, perhaps months ago. Time moved strangely out here, measured not in hours but in breaths that didn't end in screams. Sometimes she would speak aloud anyway, not expecting answers. Just keeping company, she looked up at the sky. It had no sun, no constellations, just a vast white stillness, endless and ancient. "This place doesn't need a guardian," she said softly. "Just someone who doesn't make it worse." No one replied. Only the whisper of wind along the glacier's edge. But that was enough, because at the end of everything, after the weapons, the storms, the betrayals, the long list of wrongs and the longer list of regrets, Ella Varen had found one truth worth surviving for. A simple choice, not to become the monster, not because it was easy, but because it was the only choice that mattered. She could have vanished in violence. She could have roared and burned and ripped the world down with her. But she didn't. She stepped away from vengeance, from legacy, from the lie of purpose they had written into her DNA. She stepped into silence, and the silence welcomed her. So if you are human, wherever you are, whoever you are, remember this: it's not the technology you wield that defines you. Not the strength of your bones or the sharpness of your mind. Not your loyalty, your brilliance, or your bloodline. What makes you human is what you choose not to become, even when the world forgets your name. Even when survival whispers kill, asterisk and instinct says conquer. Even when you are alone, and the storm is loud, and there is no one left to see you fall. Choose restraint, choose compassion, choose stillness. Because monsters are easy to make, but something greater, something freer, is forged only when you turn away from power and toward something gentler, something smaller, like a breath, like a hand uncurled, like a creature laying its head in your lap with no leash, no name. And trust, that is the truest thing Ella Varen ever gave this world. And the world, though it forgot her name, has not forgotten that.